Hello and welcome to this first look exploring session as we look at the Tragedy of Darius by William Alexander, written initially around 1603. It's a text that underwent revision during its lifetime, its publishing lifetime. I don't actually know precisely which versions of the text this is based on. There are minor additions that occurred, and there were some more substantial. I have just, by and large, plucked one out of the air and hoped for the best. This is the second of the plays that we've looked at by William Alexander. It is not necessarily the first one he wrote. It seems that this one probably was the first, but they were arranged in a different order. We recently enjoyed, with caveats, our last session with Croesus. And we're hoping to continue that journey now with Darius. We were discussing before we went online about precisely the identity of this Darius in relation to history/legend, and we got absolutely nowhere. So we're just going to see what the play gives us, and we'll go from there. And maybe you can put some thoughts in the comments if you have any knowledge that we cannot provide, because we're not really here to demonstrate knowledge, more to just crash in with a beautiful, glorious demonstration of our ignorance. So, reading today, Alexander and Regina is...
Rachael, actor on the East Coast, reading for Regina George.
Reading Darius, Chorus in Act 2 and Virgo is...
Emily C.A. Snyder, coming to you from New York City.
And reading Chorus in Act 1, Parmenio and Sisigambis is...
Liza Graham, representing London, UK.
And I'm your host, Robert Crighton. I will be reading nothing at all. I don't even really have stage directions, so anything I say is pretty much inferred stuff to try and keep things moving along. So we are going to dive in. Hopefully the text will not throw us too much, and we will see how all things go. Without further ado, we're going to hit Act 1. And Act 1 is primarily Darius, which is appropriate considering that this is the Tragedy of Darius. The scene is supposed in Babylon. So let's see what happens here.
What thundering power grown jealous of my state, which, having daunted the earth, perchance heaven fears, thus armed with lightning, breathing flames of hate, big with disdain, high indignation bears. Long smoothed of all whilst I, pale cares despised, in fortune's lap asleep of greatness dreamed. Even in that calm, my state a storm surprised, and ere I waked, my ruin was proclaimed. Thus I, whose only name did terror give, as idol of the world, adored over all, with crosses compassed, such a wretch do live, that who admired my might, admire my fall. Ah, then indeed I fell, when gallant stood, and phoenix light renewed their lives by death, who having sealed their force and faith with blood, would rather die than draw a borrowed breath. Yet I, not I, did view, not venge, though near, those monstrous mountains of my subjects slain, though even my enemies must courage clear, which flames of fury lightened forth in vain. Through greatest dangers, death I did pursue, till heaps of slaughtered bodies barred my way, and changed my chariot to a scarlet hue, ere wounded honor could be drawn away. Oh, how I envy yet their happy ghosts, who died whilst hope of victory remained, and in the presence of two famous hosts, to praise their valor, even their foes constrained. Shall I survive that memorable shame, which purses glory with disgrace confined? No, rather let me die, and let my name as vain, quite vanished, razed from every mind. Star boasting Babylon, all Asia's queen, blush to behold thy king in such a state, that by the gazing world he now is seen, a scorned suitor humbly to entreat, but not turned vassal, as by power appalled, though all my empire to a period come. Yet none shall vaunt that ever I was thralled. Hearts holding courage are not quite o'ercome. Should I, whose sovereignty so oft was sworn, be seen submiss to 'scape a minute's pain? No, let them bow, who but to bow were born. For Darius this indignity disdains. Since I once judged worthy to command, shall I descend a subject state to try? No, whilst a sword yields homage to this hand, I scorn to grant a greater man than I. Brave sprites, who now possess the pleasant bowers and glorious gardens of the Elysian plains. For, if deserts may move the infernal powers, that happy shade your shadow now contains. Those fatal fields where I did leave you forth, your bodies bury, but enlarge your fames. Men shall adore the relics of your worth, and trophies rear to your immortal names. All sacrifice as incense to your souls his dying sighs and sorrowing parents' tears, who now, whilst none his prospering pride controls, our conquered ensigns in his triumph bears. For it may ease your ghosts to hear his groans, whilst burdened earth rebounding back doth send a wailing echo raised from woods and stones, with wounded words to show that army's end. Why spend I speeches to disturb your rest, as but with words an idle speaker pleased? A mighty fury hath inflamed my breast, and I will rage till by revenge appeased. Did I that strong Cadusian first affront, who durst advance himself to brave our bands, then turned, applauded, and in high account charged with his spoils the honor of my hands? What could I then, all kind of doubt removed, alone adventure to an army's shame? And should I now, that ancient praise disproved, with squadrons compassed, lose that glorious name? Blind fortune, oh, thy stratagems are strange, which spoil my power and stain my honor too, and, having made my state the stage of change, has acted all was in thy power to do. Lo, I, who late of swarming troops did boast, ne'er left alone, have fortune's fraud disclosed. And all those captives, and those made captives whom I fancy most, to vaunting victors are by fates exposed. O torment but to think, death to believe, that any may my dearest part annoy, and I, wretched I, not able to relieve mine eye's chief jewel and my heart's chief joy, dear object of my thoughts, my life, my love, sweet spring of my delights, my one, my all, bright image of the excellencies above. What? Dost thou breathe, and comest not when I call? And can I be, and not be, where thou art? Hath heaven the force me from the face to bar? Or are my hands grown traitors to my heart, that they should shrink from doing what it dare. Oh, could my mind but distribute a space, those emulating thoughts which toss my breast, to pointless ciphers who but spend a place, then I alone might animate the rest, since in this great disgrace I chanced to fall. Now nothing rests to raise my fame forlorn, but by some desperate course to hazard all. I'll live with praise, or by my death fly scorn. Some prosperous issue afterward may purge this crime which fortune hath imposed on me, this crime that carries with itself a scourge, no greater torment than the want of thee. But fortune's course, what mortal can restrain, who diadems through dust for sport doth roll? A stranger now o'er my delights doth reign, and may extort the treasures of my soul. Now, not till now, I apprehend my harms, when I imagined how my best beloved must entertain mine enemy in her arms. And I, so far from offering aid, were moved. A host of furies in my breast I find, which do my soul with dreadful horrors fill, whilst melancholy musters in my mind strange apprehensions that affright me still, and this surmised disgrace, grown thoroughly strong, reads hourly in mine eyes a hateful scroll of an imagined, yet a helpless wrong. Such poisoned thoughts like serpents sting my soul. Blind love beguiles me not. Sharp-sighted fears with reason fed do make suspicion live. Oh, would God I had neither eyes nor ears which to the heart intelligence might give. This aggravates the weight of my despair when doubt objects to break love's last defense. How he is young and fierce, she young and fair. He to offend, the subject to offense. From wronging me, both cannot long abstain. Her beauty is sufficient to allure, his bravery is sufficient to obtain. Captains will force, and captives must endure. Alexander, tender my renown, though thus thou traveled to usurp my throne, I rage to have a rival in my crown, but in my love I can comport with none. That bound this flame which in thy bosom boils, if quenched with aught save blood, as base I blame. My fortunes take, but spare her honor's spoils, which not thy glory, yet our breed must shame. But pardon, dear, that which grieved thoughts burst forth, more bright thy fame that darkened is my state. By many means men may approve their worth, a woman only with a wretched mate. Chaste minds, still pure, do then most firmly stand when fortified with wedlock's sacred band. Yet let me doubt, or let me leave to love. To fear the worst, it is affection's part. I doubt not of thy truth, yet it may prove thy face, betray thy faith, thy hap, thy heart. But on thy worth my confidence relies. This doth dissolve suspicion's power again. I will repel reports as slanderous lies, which would my judgment or thy virtue stain. The fortune now my ruin doth design, yet with that traitress scorn to be conjured. She soon may help her fault, thou never thine. No help for honor's wounds, all else are cured.
Yes, let's pause there. Cheerful, happy stuff. Wonderful stuff, Emily. So, Darius, I'm going to start with, I don't normally start on a negative note, but I'm going to start with just a note from last time, actually. Use more names. Who are you talking about? This is not a problem in production. You just, find a way of sneaking them in every so often and hope that it doesn't throw the meter. But, it's like we get, Alexander at the end of the discourse, which would be really helpful if he'd just throw a few of those in just a bit earlier. Otherwise, there's some really good lines. There's some really strong imagery being thrown at us here. Thoughts on the room, Rachael?
This is, when we do stuff that's, a little earlier, like medieval stuff, we wind up relying very heavily sometimes on the sounds that they have, you know what I mean, to continue on and to understand what people are saying during a first look. And during this speech, Darius is doing some interesting stuff. The writer's doing some interesting stuff with this speech. In the section where we have despair and fair and the endure and allure, there's these R sounds that end for the woman that he's talking about in this sequence, and it's the in that a lot of these lines end with N and these R's, and you could continue and stretch those sounds out further than sounds like T or some other ones. I wonder, I don't know, I was told once that there's a lot of emotion in vowels as an actor. And so if one could stretch those sounds out, you could treat them almost like vowels and endow them with and treat them in a different way and continue them on slightly into the next line almost. You might be able to hold the beat more is what I'm trying to say, or you have choices with it to cut it off or to hold on to it if you wanted as an actor. So I think this is, long story short, he's focusing a lot on the sounds, I think, in this time around. Maybe he was last time and I didn't notice it, but yeah.
Yeah, especially considering he's Scottish, those R's could go on forever. Emily.
It was interesting because I read a bit of Croesus before, and then read the guy who overthrew Croesus, who was also Persian. And when I was looking at Darius, I was a little concerned. I'm like, the first sort of 3 or 4 stanzas felt similar to both those other guys of I'm so great. Again, that Marlovian sort of puffing yourself up. And so actually, it was lovely when I found, where's that line? Oh, yeah, I loved this. That who admired my might, admire my fall. And this speech, so some things about this speech that I found fascinating, particularly comparing it to the previous one, is that this soliloquy behaves as a soliloquy, which is to say he's actually asking questions of the audience. He's actually trying to figure things out in real time. He's coming up with a very cunning plan in real time. He's reversing his plan. He's talking to people who aren't there. Although 1000%, as you said, this guy needs to use nouns before he uses pronouns. He has to say the name and say his thesis statement before he talks about people. Because when I first talking about and I feel so, I love this person. I'm like, who am I talking about? Yeah, and exactly. When I dropped it to the word Alexander, I'm like, well, thank you. Thank you. Now I know who the previous entire page was directed to. But regardless, there was stuff to hook into as an actor, and some other things that he did in this that he did not do in the other piece. And do we think this was the earlier one or later one that he may have written?
This seems to have been composed earlier.
That's so interesting.
I'm fairly certain, but not by any meaningful span of time. It's about a year between the two, and there may have been some overlap and things.
Oh, right, the way that you do. Okay, so I also want to mention that I'm starting to feel like, I know it's a Sir William play, because it will mention a phoenix somewhere and it will mention sprites somewhere, two of his favorite images. But verse-wise, what was really interesting and very helpful as an actor is actually the beginnings of his lines. Since he's hooked into keeping, again, A, B quatrains, in some ways, you can't jump off the end of his line the way that you do in blank verse. And he's not really enjamming any of the end of his lines like the way he did in Act 4 Croesus, which was so helpful. But what he is doing is he's giving me so many places to dive into the beginning of the next line, so that I have a switch in midair at the end, at the line break. And then I will come in with an ah or an oh or yet I or a bunch of no's, which will change the thought, or a but, or a repeated word from before. And it's so helpful. So it's lovely because so often in performative verse studies, the focus is entirely on the end of the line. And I think this is a beautiful example of the importance of the beginning of the line as to why am I still speaking? How have I changed my mind? How does my tactic change? That said, you could still cut down the verse. You could still cut it down. I don't need to say it 12 times that there may be a unfaithful situation coming up. Although at least now I know what I presume the rest of the play will be about.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, I think we can take it as read that a trim for any of these plays is highly likely. But yeah, we've got fears, we've got anticipating problems, we've got obviously the general situation being very, very bad. It's there's all sorts of things going on there. Other thoughts in the room, Liza? Do you have any thoughts?
I have a few thoughts, yeah. Just looking at this opening soliloquy, always in the back of my mind is a question, could you stage this, and if so, how? And if you have an opening soliloquy like this, its function is to do the exposition, tell us who we're watching, what the situation is, why you should care about it, get the audience on the hook. And I think that this soliloquy succeeds in it maybe a little better than some of the previous ones from him that we've seen, just because its appeal is less philosophical than emotional. He has Darius, he talks about having been conquered by Alexander, and the name, in any play that involves Alexander, the name Alexander is a spell. It's a word you don't say lightly, because when you say it, it has an effect. And I don't know why that should be so of Alexander more than any other legendary figure, but it is. Maybe it's all those syllables. But so I think that might be an explanation, perhaps a justification for why he talks around Alexander for so long before naming him. Later, if we do a later tragedy by this guy, we'll see Alexander himself appear as a ghost and not name himself until about halfway down the speech.
Spoilers.
Just being on the lookout for the name of Alexander throughout this play and how it's used. The other thing that appeals emotionally about this speech, and that can potentially get an audience on the hook, it's certainly you know, as a reader, as a listener to Emily's most excellent delivery, which I can't praise too highly, let's bring offerings of whatever is most pleasing unto Emily.
That would be chocolate. Thank you very much.
Oh, yes, these are pleasing unto me also. But so the other thing that makes me vaguely care what happens to this person is not only sympathy that this is a conquered former king, and we get the whole, if I'm not a king, what am I? I'm nothing, I'm not myself, I'm something else, which we tend to see in things about deposed kings. And then we see, when now, not till now, I apprehend my harms, when I imagine how my best beloved must entertain mine enemy in her arms, and I so far from offering aid removed. Now that's an encapsulated, in 4 little lines, that tells us what the problem is. And what the problem is an important question. So it initially seems as though he's worried about his beloved being abused potentially by Alexander. But then as the speech goes on, we find that his anxiety is more about her leaving him for Alexander. That if Alexander has taken his kingdom, is the queen just going to shrug and go with it? You know, that Alexander has proved, you could view it, has proved himself to be the better man. So is the queen now going to respond to it? So that is the question that makes me care about what happens after this.
Yeah, I really was responding to that bit because it's all about his imaginations and his fears. You know, it's someone at the very lowest ebb and their mind is just running down a really dark path about, you know, plausible fears as well as, you know, possibly more rational ones as well. Emily?
There we go. Yeah, speaking about this as an opening exposition scene, as we're all saying, yeah, Darius doesn't even name himself. So, I mean, it could be Joe Schmo who thinks that he's Napoleon, for all we know, depending on how it's costumed. That said, something that, again, like I want to study because it kind of worked for me in a way that is counterintuitive to how a lot of verse drama works, is that I have found, particularly working with contemporary verse playwrights, which is my whole job, is that starting with a soliloquy is frequently a recipe for disaster in terms of losing the audience. Because the first page we've found of text tends to work for the audience as an overture, like they're literally tuning their ear to verse schemes, to meter, to how this playwright works. They almost can absorb no information. It's like they're just picking up auditory leitmotifs from like the vibe of that first. And then about page 2, you need to, as Liza was saying, get into all the exposition. And then you need to repeat it on page 3, page 4, page 5. So in a weird way, I feel like a good chunk of this opening piece works because I'm kind of like just vibing. I get that one line, oh, this is a disgraced king of some ilk. Okay, vibe. Images of like, I mean, that line, till heaps of slaughtered bodies barred my way and changed my chariot to a scarlet hue. I'm like, the imagery is great in this speech. And as we were talking about with Act 5 of Croesus, the difference is it's all personalized. It's not just, I saw this thing. It's, this is what I saw, and this is how I'm going to vibe it to you through very poetical verse. I mean, how I envy their happy ghosts. That's a vibe, man. And so in a weird way, I think this, while he needs way more just naming who's who, he kind of manages to make an opening soliloquy work in a verse play, which like rarely happens.
Yeah, there are a lot of examples of Let's start with a really long speech because that'll get our juices going. We've had that in Robert Garnier's works and lots of other texts. Navigating that, and it is all about him, isn't it? Let me die, should I, and it's all personalised, which does give us that little route in. We should move on, however, because we haven't finished Act 1, because we've got a chorus to respond in some fashion to what, or not. Chorus might talk about something else. Who knows? Who knows what the chorus is going to talk about? So, Liza, chorus for Act 1, please.
O more than miserable mind, which of all things itself worst knows, and through presumption made quite blind, is puffed up with every wind which fortune in derision blows. The man no stable bliss can find whose heart is guided by his eye, and trusts too much betraying shows which make a cunning lie. Oft short prosperity breeds long adversity. For who abuse the first, the last o'erthrows. What things so good which not some harm may bring? Even to be happy is a dangerous thing. Who on himself too much depends, and makes an idol of his wit, for every favour fortune sends, self-flatterer, still himself commends, and will no sound advice admit, but at himself begins and ends, and never takes a moment's leisure to try what fault he may commit, but drunk with froths of pleasure, thirsts for praise above measure, imaginary treasure, which slowly comes and flies at every fit. And what is most commended at this time, succeeding ages may account a crime. A mighty man who is respected, and by his subjects thought a god, thinks, as his name on high erected hath what he list at home effected, it may like wonders work abroad. Oh, how this folly is detected! For though he sit in royal seat, and as he list his vassals load, yet others who are great live not by his conceit, nor weigh what he doth threat, but plague his pride oft ere he fear the rod. There are rare qualities required in kings. A naked name can never work great things. They who themselves too much esteem, and vainly vilipend their foe, oft find not fortune as they deem, and with their treasure would redeem their error past. Behold, even so our king of blame doth worthy seem. His adversary who did scorn, and thought who in his name did go, the laurel should have worn his triumphs to adorn. But he with shame hath shorn the fruits of folly ever ripe with woe. An enemy, if it be well advised, though seeming weak, should never be despised. But what? The minions of our kings, who speak at large and are believed, dare brag of many mighty things, as they could fly, though wanting wings. And deeds by words might be achieved, but time at length their lies to light, their sovereign to confusion brings. Yet so they gain, they are not grieved, but charm their prince's sight, and make what's wrong seem right. Thus ruin they his might, that when he would he cannot be relieved. More kings in chambers falls by flattery's charms, than in the field by adversaries' arms. Lo! Though the success hath approved what Charidemus had foreshown, yet with his words no man was moved. For good men first must be removed before their worth can well be known. The king would hear but what he loved, and what him pleased not did despise. So were the better sort o'erthrown, and sycophants unwise, who could the truth disguise, were suffered high to rise, that him who raised them up they might cast down. Thus princes will not hear, though some deceive them. Things as they are, but as themselves conceive them.
Well, that chorus has got some stuff going on. Yeah, that dances around in a very. I mean, it's really labouring some of the rhymes. Sight, right, might. I particularly liked. But yeah, interesting things. Thoughts on the room? I don't know if Emily is waving because on my screen you've frozen again, and I don't know why. It's my screen is glitching. I don't know. Anyone else waving? Anyone else want to jump in?
I mean, I will. Can you see me?
I currently can't on my feed, but I doesn't mean you're not moving. It's
okay.
It's very odd. I don't know why this keeps happening.
Okay. Let me know. This was so personalized and so many lines. Beautifully done, Liza. Beautifully done. So many lines that I was like, wait, stop, go back. I want to like commit this aphorism to memory. They were flying by so fast. Yeah, as though they could fly. The wanting wings is beautiful. It was fascinating too to see, though. I just keep thinking of Croesus. So sorry. But the ending speech of that had like a repeated refrain of no bliss, something like that. And this is in conversation with that same question, with that same thing of the man no stable bliss can find. The stacking of the three, where is it? But charm the prince's sight and make what's wrong seem right, thus ruin they his might. And pulling that up from previously with, but time at length there lies to light, their sovereign to confusion brings, yet they so gain they are not grieved, but charm, like playing with the rhyme. Hopefully this isn't a typo. Hopefully this is correct. Because he hiccups that rhyme in there, although I was fascinated by watching this, I remember that really hitting me as an audience member and going, oh, a third rhyme that's punching home the message even more of you must hear me. I mean this. As well as keeping it not A-B, but just an A. Was such a lovely technique, and he does it later. And sycophants unwise, who could the truth disguise, were suffered high to rise. And you could feel it goes into dimeter, where it's been trimeter for the majority of the rest of this course. So like, there's just really exciting things he's doing, plus dropping all this truth.
Yeah. So what's the chorus telling us? What is this truth bomb that this particular chorus is keen on delivering to the room? Liza.
Okay, first of all, I love how salty this chorus is. Just in case you were feeling any sympathy for Darius after his speech, the chorus is like, no, you fucking deserved this. And here's why. And whether the chorus is more angry at Darius or at the Persian people or the Persian government that counseled him ill and allowed him to fall, or dropped insufficient truth bombs while he reigned, what the chorus is saying, and it rings out to me as an American living in Britain, and for both of my countries, and I'm sure it also was meant to ring out to Jacobean readers. We had a lot of cautions for kings, rules for kings in Croesus. What we also saw in Croesus was the chorus taking different verse forms. The final chorus in Croesus, I think, was a 14-line stanza. The one that ended, there is no bliss before the end, that was the end line, I think. This is also a 14-line stanza form. And the rhyme scheme is intricate. I would recommend inserting stanza breaks every 14 lines and seeing how you how he works with structure, as Emily pointed out, some of the best things about it. So yeah, the whole thing is what a great person believes depends on what they are told. They cannot necessarily be in touch with the truth of what is happening everywhere in their kingdom. They need to be told the truth, and they need to be told the truth by the people around them. Therefore, the people around them need to be interested in the good government of the person at the top, and not simply in their own gain, because they will simply tell the person at the top falsehoods that will advance them, but which will ultimately cause the fall of the kingdom. Where is it? So it lambasts the king for flattering himself and his counselors for not interrupting his own flattery and for enabling it rather than telling him the truth. In Croesus, we saw better to we had it hammered home that it's better for a king to be wise than to be fortunate. Darius was fortunate. Darius was not wise. So, but we've fast-forwarded all the stuff that Croesus went through and gone straight to the downfall, which I quite like starting in Medias Res like this. There were some lines I was gonna bring out. Yeah, the lines that Emily quoted, talking about bad government ministers saying, "Yet so they gain, they are not grieved, but charm their prince's sight and make what's wrong seem right, thus ruin they his might." And what you think is true is not true simply because you wish it were so, no matter how powerful you are. Don't let the Republicans take the Senate.
Yeah, it's been a keystone of drama for sort of 100 years prior to this, of especially anything presented at court. That thing about the advisors, the people getting access, is a major theme, and this is being written at exactly the time when James is coming to the throne, so there may be keying into that logic of make sure you surround yourself with good people, James, because that won't go wrong at all. Anyway, we do need to move on, but there's some lovely stuff came out of Act 1. We're going to have a slightly different game in Act 2, because in Act 2, there are two people on stage at the same time. So we have Alexander, and we have Parmenio. So no indications as to precisely when they're supposed to appear in respect of each other. They might both be already on, or one of them may enter later on. It starts with Alexander.
Behold the heavens with a benign aspect, to prosper this brave enterprise intend, and with propitious stars seem to direct this great beginning to a glorious end. Who would be famous must of force aspire, all those astonished who my troops do view, doubt of these two, which most they should admire. My coming, or my conquering with so few, so mighty minds, whilst for great actions bend, force fortune oft to favor them in all, where breasts more base, divining bad event, through superstitious fears procure their fall. Oh, how I wonder when I call to mind that monstrous camp, which not so much as doubted, dim seemed the sun, well as their armor shined. Men had not heard the thunder whilst they shouted. Avant coureurs advanced to examine, when they so mean my numbers had perceived, did think them small to satisfy the famine that their huge host of slaughter had conceived. And yet in end this proved a poisoned food, which of their own to their confusion yields huge mounds of murdered corpses and seas of blood, unburied bodies buried all the fields. So now that few whom they contemned so far see how mortality itself deceives, have quite o'ermatched their multitudes in war, and made the world near waste to people's graves. Then, dear Parmenio, since the fates afford so fair an entry to our first designs, let us go follow, lanterned by the sword, that fortune which the heavens our hopes assigns.
This high attempt as we would wish succeeds. What hosts have we o'erthrown, what cities razed? Lo, populous Asia trembles at our deeds, and martial Europe doth remain amazed. Greece, which both Mars and Pallas did defend, a humble supplicant before thee falls. Rebellious Thebes, which durst with thee contend, lies now entombed within her broken walls. That sea-commanding Tyre, reposing much in liquid towers that Neptune reared in vain, hath now confirmed thy forces to be such that nothing can resist thy just disdain. No doubt the ancient Grecians' ghosts are glad to see the fierce barbarians brought so low, yet are for envy of thy fortune sad, and, though unbodied, blush at this o'erthrow. Miltiades by all men was admired, who once in Greece their flying troops pursued, and he who with a stratagem retired, and Salamina's straits with blood imbrued. But yet, for all the captain of that age, the eastern monarch's empire was enlarged, who in their country flaming all with rage, the sea with ships, the land with armies charged. He, with more swarms of men than autumn's clusters, drank rivers dry, and marched on Neptune's back. By measure, not by number, made his musters, did scourge the winds, strived mountains, plains to make. All Europe feared then to be forced to bow, whilst the earth did groan to bear so great an host. But thou hast come, seen, and o'ercomed them now, even in the bounds wherein their power was most. That haughty foe who vilipended oft our predecessor's force, and scorned our own, now laid as low as he was once aloft, with his disgrace must make thy valor known. He doth by this acknowledge his distress in laboring thus to have his friends restored. This message mighty prince imports no less, by his request thy conquest is decored. For the recovery of his captived queen, he offered hath innumerable gold, a mass so great that such was never seen, more, as they brag, than Macedon can hold. My counsel is that you accept his offers, and with his daughters render her again. Who would make war must not have empty coffers, where one for glory, thousands fight for gain. And if those ladies, guarded captives, stay, it cost and trouble breeds to fit their state. Thus more to charge, or charges to defray, to vex or ease. Advise, and not too late.
If come to traffic in a servile sort, and like a merchant bent, but to embrace, all else despised, that which might gains import, then your opinion purchase might a place. But soon I surfeit of such melting things, and famish but for fame and crowns of kings.
If Alexander I, so would I do.
If I Parmenio were, so would I too.
So you bind soldiers, let them dames redeem.
Save thanks or praise, no treasure I esteem.
Even good proves ill when done unto a foe.
What greater glory than to conquer so?
Gold is the god that conquers in all parts.
True magnanimity doth ravish hearts.
War's sinews treasures are, which most not fail.
Stout beasts, strong hands, not basely given, prevail.
The want of wages makes a mutinous band.
But who dare disobey when I command?
Those are thought fools who riches do disdain.
A gallant mind likes glory more than gain.
But who delights in such an airy store?
If I be singular, I seek no more.
The truth by princes is not understood. But yet I hear your soldiers oft exclaim that your ambition but exhausts their blood, who perish all to purchase you a name. Yet careless what they lose, so you may win, that like your mind your kingdom may want bounds. One battle's end another doth begin, whilst you the glory gain, they naught but wounds. Such rash reports oft blown in every ear do breed base grudge and lofty tumults too. When leaving reverence, duty, love, and fear, what dare not mutinous troops attempt to do? Retire in time while as the heavens are clear. You have performed, and that even soon, more than your own could hope, your foes could fear. Yea, yet more strange than some can trust, though done. Your worth in war as bright as glory shone, which even by envy never could be stained. Your skill in peace would likewise now be known. Calm virtue, guiding what stern valor gained. A state well ruled the fate of kings doth raise, no less than fought in fields or battered towns. More hard it is, and doth deserve more praise, to guide than get, to keep than conquer crowns. In fortune's sphere's chief height your glory placed, cannot now move unless it be more low. And if it once descend, then quite disgraced, each artisan your statues will o'erthrow. For in the war, as you may well perceive, there doth no little part depend on fame. If we but once the least small check receive, the world will gather to procure our shame. Then tempt not fortune further than you need. Your rashly mounting thoughts let reason reign, lest whilst your hope with trophies feigned you feed, a moment lose what many days did gain. Let Darius prove all monarchs' pattern now, what wandering star doth sway the course of crowns. That prince, to whom the Orient once did bow, him only now his misery renowns. Scarce moved to call you king, though twice o'erthrown. At last, to match with you he doth agree, and with his daughter hath for dowry shown that great Euphrates shall your border be. Or otherwise he condescends to give great store of gold, or what yourself desires, if that his mother, wife, and children live, to have them rendered as he oft requires. Let not lofty thoughts cloud reason's eyes. Remember what strange realms will him embrace, which scarce he knows by name, nor never tries, where, if he fled, your troops would tire to chase.
Peace, peace, Parmenio. Now thou makest me rage, with those thy words not worthy of our ears. It seems the coldness of declining age hath killed thy courage with the frost of fears. Did I abandon thee, my native soil, and made my ensign shadow foreign fields, as feared for danger, or else flying toil, that I should turn whilst yet our foe not yields? Then as my labors are but lost at last, which have but bred an appetite of praise, that I might die displeased, the time once past, when means remained the state like Jove's to raise. No, I will reign, and I will reign alone, disdaining to admit of more commanders, for as the heavens can hold no son but one, the earth cannot contain two Alexanders. The spacious circuit of this peopled round seems not sufficient to confine my thought, and oh, would God there could mo worlds be found, that many might to grace our deeds be brought. Oh, I could wish that the ocean were firm land, where none but hideous giants had retreat, such as at Phlegra field in strife did stand against the gods for the ethereal seat. These could encourage martial minds to strike, who, when subdued, would yield eternal praise. I conquer men, but many did thee like, and after ages may my equal raise. But since none such my triumphs are to grace, such as there are, all to subjection bring, and as a pest, I vow to fly all peace, till all the world adore me for their king. Let them retire in time who danger dread, yet think on this, whilst glory bend to wed, that ye abandoned me in time of need, and that I stayed to fight when, as ye fled, passed home in darkness, servile rest to find. I measure not my courage by my numbers.
Your majesty doth much mistake my mind. You know what I endured, what cares, what cumbers, and for my part I to your eyes appeal, which well can witness what my hands have wrought. All what I spake proceeded of clear zeal, and not of cowardice or fear of aught. Nor match I vile repose with honest pains. My courage oft-times tried is not grown cold, nor yet that vigour hath not left my veins which spurred my sprite in youth, though I be old.
'Tis not enough that you yourself be so, to be the same you should the rest exhort. Is he returned who was ordained to go and view the captives? What doth he report?
As we have heard of him who thither went, while they as yet not of support despaired, and courteously were led unto a tent which we of purpose caused to be prepared, even in the way one fortune there to spy the diadem which Darius erst had borne, though glorious once which low on the earth did lie, as erst for pomp then wondered at with scorn. Straight they imagined from his royal head, whose dignity it sometime did decore, none could it cast except himself were dead, and if so were, they wished to live no more. When they had entered in the tent to weep, your servant came and at the entry knocked, who, finding them so quiet, thought asleep had closed their eyes, or else that he was mocked. At length by force he made a patient way, and was advanced them lovingly to greet, when lo, the ladies prostrated all lay, and with a flood of tears bedewed his feet. Then said, by death expecting to be free, let us entomb great Darius like a king, that when we first his funeral honour see, death must to us a great contentment bring. This oft they urged, though he attested there that Darius was not dead as they supposed, but lived with hope his ruins to repair, and in the power of other realms reposed. Then did he urge what comfort and relief they might attend, depending on your grace. Thus, having toiled to mitigate their grief, it seemed they longed to see my sovereign's face.
I pity still, and not insult o'er such, though once mine enemies who are humbled so, and lest weak fear oppress their minds too much, to comfort them, straight to their tent I'll go.
And exeunt. So yeah, a lot of back and forth there. Parmenio saying, "Take the money, take the money." Yeah, we've got a lot of soldiers. They'd like to get paid. Let's give peace a chance.
$1 million.
And
Plus,
Alexandra getting a bit cross. Getting a bit cross there.
Plus, if we keep these ladies according to their state, it'll just be nothing but trouble, man. I mean, Parmenio, here we have a conflict between the ideal and the real. We have, Alexander with some possibly hubristic, but extremely, inspiring, one foot on the cliff edge, cloak blowing out behind him, wind machine, hero pose, stuff, and Parmenio going, military budget says,
Yes,
there's like a
have
deficit.
you seen the payroll?
of 3 zeros here, and he just offered you more gold than we can physically carry, and I'd like some gold. Yes, please.
Yeah. He's got a point.
I mean, and it's for once, he's not being greedy. We could see a venal, what a venal person would. It is realpolitik. He's being practical.
Yeah, absolutely. And the end of the scene, we segue. It's like Alexander just goes, "Okay, enough of this discussion now. I will literally just shut down debate. And could we find out what's happening in the tent?" And we get this little very brief moment of description of what somebody else saw. I've got a note just going, oh, what a good scene. Wouldn't it be lovely to see that scene? I'd quite like to see that scene. Oh, well, never mind.
It's a neoclassical play.
I know,
Everything that actually happens somewhere else and gets reported.
I know, but at least it's short. That speech could have been 10 times longer. It's actually reassuringly brief. Emily, are you waving or just your hand is?
Yes, no. But I don't want to interrupt you. So this is the New England.
Interrupt me. No, so I don't count.
Yeah, again, it's fascinating to see that this playwright, when he gets into pure back and forth, he falls into couplets rather than AB, which he did, again, in Croesus. Go watch Croesus. Learn all about this playwright. But what's lovely about it then is you get a sense of stickamithia, of them trading off, picking up what the other person is putting down. Which is lovely. And I think my absolute favorite part, I need to find it again. Yes, here it is. When you do something that you can only do with rhymed couplets, which is to steal the rhyme, which then gives you so much status, so that Alexander doesn't get to finish his quatrain with "Pass home in darkness, servile rest to find. I measure not my courage by my numbers." And Parmenio slides right in with, "Your majesty doth much mistake my mind. You know what I endured, what cares, what cumbers." And actually the fact that the end of the quatrain is again personalized, "You know what I endured, what cares, what cumbers," is great. What happens so often in sort of neoclassical work, but also in very early playwrights' work, is you'll have a scene with two people on the stage, but they're talking right past each other or right at each other. It's, "I'm waiting for you to shut up so I can say my philosophy." And you sort of take turns more as if you could be at two lecterns. And as you're saying, this is a scene that's a scene. They are trying to convince each other. And I was even thinking in Parmenio's long speech, it would be lovely to stage it with Parmenio going, "No, I'm going to say another example," and not let Alexander talk. And you could just let Alexander get more and more frustrated and, maybe making movements forward to again grab it back until finally Alexander comes in with, "Peace, peace, Parmenio, now thou makes me rage." So the verse itself is actually doing the scene work, helping the scene work, supporting the scene work.
Yeah, and it's lovely those the Parmenio Alexander exchange. It's calling back all the stuff from Garnier that we've done before, and plays that are perhaps this is a bit old fashioned actually by the time this is being written. I don't know what the sort of textual exchange and what's coming perhaps back into fashion actually in literary culture, because that's the thing that sometimes things skip a generation and people go, "Hey, that stuff that was cool from 20-30 years ago. Yeah, let's do some more of that." And yeah, because we've seen a bit of that in some other texts as well, where that John Day is sort of looking back in the past of going, "Hey, I really loved all that stuff. I want to nick some of that material." And yeah, but doing it in a slightly different way. Rachael.
No, I was also going to say that because he's a courtier, there's some styles of art that are more popular with certain classes of people, and perhaps this is something that was, maybe because it's out of sync and doing its own thing, compared to the stuff that we see other people are putting on stage or doing at the time, that this is a style that's more acceptable in the court. Or maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe we've had other people who've come on and front of the king and given us some less neoclassical, philosophical almost style of writing in front of the king.
Well,
But
the one of the questions is, whether this is being directed, in that direction at all. I mean, it seems to be primarily literature. It may be addressing issues to do with the king, and he may be associated with James coming in, but that doesn't automatically mean that that's what this text is doing. So it may be that's part of it. But we should be a bit careful about that with this text until we've done perhaps a bit more research to see whether that's really a thing, or if it's just feels like it would be nice if it was a thing. Other thoughts, Liza? Were you waving?
Oh, just what Rachael was saying about different perceived social classes of different forms of verse. In practice, of course, the court liked a wide range of entertainment, but I agree that this seems, partly because of the verse scheme, the consonant ABAB and the more complex forms of the chorus, but also because the quality of the lines is so end-stopped. It reads as very formal, as well as all the rhetorical, philosophical stuff, which there's a little bit less of here than there was in Croesus, but it's still got that tone. It reads like things that are okay for high-minded entertainment, and Lord knows, knowing what one does of James and his courtiers, they were probably sitting there going, "When are the clowns coming on? I want some fart jokes." But yeah, this certainly reads as courtly, or indeed academic. This could play at the Inns of Court, possibly, or at other universities. But yeah, it's Emily used the word Marlovian earlier, and it's the end-stopped quality of the lines that makes me think in particular of Tamerlane. That, every line sounds like you're proclaiming something, which is great, and you're sitting here for 2 hours going, I love all these proclamations, but somehow I've lost the will to live.
Right. Well, talking of, we're going to dance into a slightly different verse tune now, because we have the chorus to close Act 2. So let's see. Well, we enjoyed what the chorus did with Act 1. Could be a different chorus, of course. Could be some totally different, come in, I'm going to do a different verse for. Who knows? Who knows what this chorus is going to do? Take it away, chorus Act 2.
Of all the passions which possess the soul, none so disturbs vain mortal minds as vain ambition, which so blinds the light of them that nothing can control, nor curb their thoughts who will aspire. This raging vehement desire of sovereignty no satisfaction finds, but in the breasts of men doth ever roll the restless stone of Sisyphus to torment them. And as his heart, who stole the heavenly fire, the vulture gnaws, so doth that monster rent them. Had they the world would not content them. This race of Ixion to embrace the clouds, condemn the state wherein they stand, and save themselves would all command. As one desire is quenched, another buds. When they have traveled all their time, heaped blood on blood and crime on crime, there is an higher power that guides their hand. More happy he whom a poor cottage shrouds against the tempest of the threatening heaven. He stands in fear of none envies him. His heart is upright and his ways are even, where other states are still 'twixt 6 and 7. That damned wretch, up with ambition blown, then whilst he turns the wheel about, thrown high and low, within, without, in striving for the top, is tumbling down. Those who delight in climbing high, oft by a precipice do die. So do the stars sky-climbing worldlings flout, but this disease is fatal to a crown. Kings, who have most, would most augment their bounds, and if they be not all, they cannot be, which to their damage commonly redounds. The weight of too great states themselves confounds. This mighty toiling to enlarge their state, themselves exceedingly deceive, in hazarding the thing they have for a felicity which they can conceive. Though their dominions they increase, yet their desires grow never less. For though they conquer much, yet more they crave, which fatal fortune doth attend the great. And all the outward pomp that they assume doth but with shows disguise the mind's distress. And who to conquer all the earth presume, a little earth shall them at last consume. Oh. And if it fortune that they die in peace, a wonder, wondrous, rarely seen, who conquer first, heavens find a mean to raise their empire, and ofttimes their race, who coming to the crown with rest, and having all in peace possessed, do straight forget what bloody broils have been, ere first their fathers could attain that place. As seas do flow and ebb, states rise and fall, and princes, when their actions prosper best, for fear their greatness should oppress the small, as some of hatred envied are of all. We know what end the mighty Cyrus made, whom whilst he strived to conquer still, a woman, justly grieved, did kill, and in a bloody vessel rolled his head. Then said, whilst many wondering stood, since thou did famish for such food, now quench thy thirst of blood with blood at will. Some who succeeded him, since he was dead, have reigned a space with pomp and yet with pain, whose glory now can do to us no good. And what so long they labored to obtain, all in an instant must be lost again. Lo, Darius, once so magnified by fame, by one whom he contemned o'ercome, for all his bravery now made doom, with downcast eyes must signify his shame, who puffed up with ostensive pride, think fortune bound to serve on their side? Can never escape to be the prey of some. Such spend their prosperous days as in a dream, and it were in fortune's bosom sleeping, then in a dull security abide, and of their doubtful state neglect the keeping, whilst fearful ruin comes upon them creeping. Thus the vicissitude of worldly things doth oft to us itself detect, when heavenly powers exalt, deject, confirm, confound, erect, and ruin kings. So Alexander, mighty now, to whom the vanquished world doth bow, with all submission, homage, and respect, doth fly a borrowed flight with fortune's wings. Nor enters he his dangerous course to ponder, yet if once fortune bend her cloudy brow, all those who at his sudden success wonder may gaze as much to see himself brought under.
Yeah, this chorus still has a lot going on here. Really, you know, I don't often really get into the choruses. I struggle with them. This chorus, they can stay. Because there's a lot of sarcasm can be drawn out of some of this. It's just, some really good stuff. Liza.
I just idly wondering, with no knowledge whatsoever, I'm just speculating whether this might be to do with William Alexander being a Scot and knowing what James had got up to as King of Scotland and wanting to caution him as king of a now united Scotland and England?
It might be a bit early for that.
It's true. They were published 1604.
Yeah, I mean he's
But-
writing it around 1603, so it's it might be a reach. That doesn't
There
mean
were
you
two or
can't
three
infer it.
There were 2 or 3 candidates for heir presumptive. James was definitely in the running.
Oh yeah, that was relatively assumed.
But I suppose it's a lot easier to criticize the King of Scotland than the King of Scotland and England.
Well, it's that thing about kings. They always want more. They've got this, they'll have more, and so that you could perceive that in there. And of course, if we're watching it today and we know it was then, and people will read that into it, regardless of whether it doesn't have to be true, literally, to not resonate. Emily.
Oh, what a fun speech. Oh my gosh, what a fun chorus. In my mind, if I were staging this, I would want the chorus to stay on stage the whole time with a pint in the corner. Right? And just occasionally like, okay, let's talk. This is so interesting that the common person's point of view is so front and center. And so clearly it feels like the side that we need to be taking as the audience, which when you have a monarch play is not always the case, right? So often it's about the kings. I'm going to completely leave it to Liza as to what in the world is going on with the rhyme, because it started A, B, B, A, and then was C, C, D, F, G, back to whatever, aspire to fire. It was all over the place, but I also kind of loved that because from inside, what it started to feel like was, I will rhyme when I damn well please.
Yeah, there are bits when you're sort of going it's going into sort of freeform verse at times, and I'm looking at that going, is that just incorrectly laid out, or no? It sort of looks deliberate, and it works.
It felt deliberate. Well, because again, it felt like it was doing more of that hip hop thing of I will rhyme for emphasis, not because of formality. I will rhyme so that you will hear my dig. So I will have a setup rhyme and a payoff rhyme, but otherwise I'm going to be playing and flowing. Yeah, which is just really modern and exciting.
It's got some moves. Definitely got some moves. We need to move on to the final scene of the session, Act 3, Scene 1. So we're going to be pausing midway through an act. I apologise for the flow issues that may occur there. We have in the scene Sisigambis, Regina, and Virgo. So we have the extended family in the room, and we're going to effectively get to a pause point where other people enter to the scene. I don't know whether everybody's on at the beginning. I suspect they are, but maybe not. We'll see how this all goes.
O dismal day, detested be thy light, and would the gods, but gods neglect our case, the world were wrapped in a Cimmerian night, that no proud eye might gaze on our disgrace. Why did the heavens reserve my feeble age to make my burden more when strength grows less? Could nothing but my harms their wrath assuage, thus offered up on the altar of distress? Have I spent my youth in pomp and pleasure, and had my springtime graced with pleasant flowers, that the autumn, which should reap the summer's treasure, might be distempered with such stormy showers? And did smooth calms and sunshines for a space make all my voyage through the world a sport, that I should fall when near to end my race, tossed with storms, even perish at my port? Yet for all this, were I exposed alone, the wretched object of Jove's thundering arms, I should not think I had just cause to moan, when I but wailed mine own, not others' harms. Ah me, on those whom more than life I love, the state-disturbing blasts of fortune fall. Yet each of them some several loss doth move, but I in anguish bear a part with all. I suffered when I saw Oxatres slain, my loving son and most entirely loved. I died in Darius when he tried in vain what fates would do, yet still their hatred proved. The heavens to plague me more, yet make me breath. O rigor rare! What tortures rack my breast, who feel the sour but not the sweet of death. Still coursed, not killed, lest that should breed me rest. Yet Jove, if this may disenflame thine ire, let all thy lightning light upon my head. To be consumed with a celestial fire some comfort were, since that I must be dead.
Leave, mother, those complaints as fit for me, who still must grieve my friends and grace my foes, whose fortune is so wretched still to be, that all the world may wonder at my woes. Lo, that dear lord and treasure of my thought, whose presence I my paradise esteemed, to such a precipice is headlong brought, that he from ruin cannot be redeemed. On what prop can I repose my trust, when of his state I first the greatness ponder? Next, how his diadem, drenched in the dust, was fortune's trophy, and all Asia's wonder. He whose imperious speech the world respected, and as an oracle had in regard, he vanquished now, and with contempt neglected, even as a supplicant can scarce be heard. And yet I know this more doth grieve his soul than all the harm which happened to his state. His power o'er me that any can control, who, as his idol, was adored of late. Shall he, pure quintessence of my best part, then only testify the love he bears? No, by mine eyes I will distill my heart, and for his sake dissolve myself in tears. Would God my breast might still transparent be, that as through crystal all might mark my mind, and of my loyal thoughts the secret sea, whose great affection cannot be confined. This prison's worth hath bounded but mine eyes, and banished them the object of their joy. My fiery heart, well winged with fancies, flies, and where thou goest dost still thy steps convoy. Dear, whilst thou dost enjoy this common air, those who me captive think do grossly err. For whilst thou liv'st, how can thy queen despair, whom thou to soul and sceptre dost prefer? Yet flatter I myself whom am accursed of those mishaps which make my thoughts to stray. The memory may serve to make me burst. I faint. I feel my spirits decay.
Help! Help! Alas, the Empress falls!
O day of darkness, what a world of woes!
This heavy sight my panting heart appalls. Heaven, earth, and all are now become our foes.
No creature hath more cause to moan than I, whose father's fortune oft afflict mine ears, whilst I my mother's misery must spy, so that of both my breast the burden bears.
What inhumane humanity is this, with such a cruel pity to oppress, to bring pale ghosts back from the fields of bliss, yet to be plunged in the ocean of distress? Oh, unkind kindness that by saving slays, and would with loveless love my love control. Of this braving sun the loathsome rays do clear mine eyes, but to confound my soul.
Dear daughter, strive your passions to restrain, lest that the torrent of your grief grow such, that both it carry you where horrors reign, and him o'erwhelm for whom you mourn so much. No doubt but he, if we rest captives thus, disdaining those indignities of ours, to venge himself in reobtaining us, will hazard all his oriental powers. But what Comfort can a wretch afford whose careworn breast the worst of woe contains. Yet, though my heart would fain impugn my word, I hopeless speak of hope to ease her pains.
Plagued with what is, what may be never pause, since we must hold our grief our greatest good, and do not feed false hopes, for we have cause even to sigh out our souls and weep our blood.
I wail my son,
And I my husband's fall.
I wail my father, and in him us all.
no woe like mine cannot be relieved. I wail his woe who should my woe assuage, who lives by me, by whom I should have lived, sport of my youth and pillar of mine age.
No woe like mine, who for my mate mourn here, for love of whom I had all others left. But what a mate! Myself, or one more dear? Yet from myself by force am reft.
No woe like mine, who born a monarch's child, hoped by my birth of fortune's best to boast. Yet are my hopes even at the height beguiled, and what I hoped in most hath harmed me most.
I mourn for him who in my womb was formed.
I mourn for him in whom love me transformed.
I mourn for him who did give form to me.
Shall I no more in him my image see?
Shall I never in his joy rejoice?
Shall I never hear his cheerful voice?
Would God my ruin might his ransom be?
Would God my life might set free?
Would God the life he gave him life might give?
Must these gray hairs my son's green youth survive?
Lest twice made die, I'll first prevent his fall.
Shall I live last to suffer for you all?
But whilst our wretched state we justly moan, we may lament this infant to a space, who in mishap inferior were to none if he could apprehend his tragic case.
Oh, then how can my heart be burst? Oh, then how can my heart burst be, whom nature moves most to bemoan his harms? I think the hosts of heaven I thundering see, on me, my husband, and him in my arms. Dear image of myself, in whom I live, thy shape not shames the greatness of thy sire, but of thy birth clear evidence doth give. Thy sour sweet sight adds coals to my desire. Thou who shouldst comfort most, torment'st thou me? Huge hosts of passions now my soul assembles. Oh, how I grieve, and yet am glad to see thee, though not him, whom thy sweet face resembles. Go bear this babe from hence, a wound too deep hath pierced me with compassion of his part. Yet let him stay, I joy to hear him weep. This mother's passion melts my bursting heart. Of many woes, this last is not the least. That unbegun thy glory thus must end. Thy fortune's sun, my son, set in the east, whilst all the world thy rising did attend. Must to this innocent taste of mishap, whose tender age cannot discern his state, and thus be plagued, yea, in his nurse's lap, inherit woe by birth? Ah, cruel fate! If thou couldst hope, what great hopes hast thou lost, who art defrauded of so high a throne? Ah, in thy cradle must I see thee crossed, whom I designed so great when we were gone. Yet happy hapless child, who canst not know from whence the fountain of our sorrows flows, nor what it is that men call high or low, nor on what thorn the rose of honor grows. Yet hast thou felt the prick before the smell? Is this the benefit thy birthright brings, a captive here in misery to dwell? Then better not be born, nor come of kings. Oh, what a noise is this that thus affrights? I think of tears the torrents to restrain, since souls when sad at just complaint delights, they still would plague, yet stop me to complain. Or is it one who doth lament our case, and is a rare thing in affliction kind? Who would behold how we can death embrace, death sovereign physic for a troubled mind?
By many signs we may ourselves assure 'tis Alexander, whom we longed not for.
What? I die, and must mine eyes endure that hateful object which I most abhor?
Spare such speeches now, lest all go wrong. We are environed with outrageous hosts. Those who are weak must yield unto the strong, for victors rage when as the vanquished boasts. I will entreat him too, not for myself, age bows my body to embrace pale death, but that you yet may shun this wrackful shelf, whose youth and beauty worthy are of breath.
And after some sort of offstage noise, trumpets or something, Alexander enters, but we're pausing there. We've got 3 generations of the Darius household here. Mother, wife, daughter, and baby as well. There's a baby on stage, baby boy, in some fashion. They're all not in a good place. Not in a good place. Though Virgo does manage to at least get in an episode title for an episode of Doctor Who, so that's always nice. Second early modern Doctor Who reference that we've managed to find so far. It's a William Hartnell story as well, so that's always heartening. Back to back to the play. We have this sort of chorus of lamentation and stuff. Thoughts from the room. Where are we on this one, Emily?
First, I want to say bravo to Liza and to Rachael. Like, beautifully done. And I hope you have more pleasant things to say than I. This scene bothered me as a woman. It bothered me. And I will tell you why. Here are the reasons. This is a perfect example of why the Bechdel test needs to exist, which is, and I was thinking about it, actually, what I do like about this scene, just as a scholar, is this tells me why the Bechdel test needs to exist. Just in case you do not know, Bechdel test is, does a play have a scene with named women who are talking about something other than a third man who is not there, basically. But what that's really asking is, do the women have scene objectives? Do they want anything? And while I think, and Liza and Rachael, I'm so fascinated as to what you experience within, while I think that Sisigambis, maybe, the mother, that first speech was so like raw, and you could see the mother of Darius, this woman who raised this warlike son. And by the end, when finally it's okay, well, we gotta make sure that this kid isn't killed, this infant child, presumably. Then you've got objective, you get something to play. But the whole middle section where it was just the only thing you can play is the competition of I'm more sad than you is so boring to play. And and all my sadness is not anything about me, where it's so frustrating. I'm just gonna be really angry for a second. It's so frustrating because the chorus even has a personality and these women don't. The chorus had a definitive point of view and a different way of rhyming, and he doesn't even do interesting rhyme for these 3 women. I mean, dude, if you're gonna do something, at least give us Terzarima or something. What the hey are you doing? The amount of bad, this is bad, Sir William. Bad, naughty, not happy. Okay, that's how I feel. I would love to know what others think.
So that's William Alexander back in his bed. No supper. Liza, Rachael, thoughts? Rachael.
I don't. The way he wrote women, it really feels like the way court women, court women talk, much more. The "go get me my smelling salts" type conversations of yeah. I mean there's it's the Bechdel test. This one definitely is not the type of sequence that passes, that test. We've had other stuff that does, and that's very interesting. This is just I don't know. It's just I don't know. It just doesn't pass that test. But I don't know. There's just I don't know. That's all. I don't really have much thoughts on this section.
Liza.
Well, this what it recalls to me is first of all, everything you both said is true. Second of all, if I were directing this scene, given what it is, how could I then bring out some interest, some soul, some character, some backbone in these women, who, after all, are the three most important women in the Persian state, as far as we know. Sisigambis, the king's mother, Statira, and I think it is interesting. I mean, he follows history. The two other women are both named Statira. So Statira Regina is the queen, and the one designated Virgo maiden is the daughter. So yeah, Sisigambis crosses over quite a bit with Hecuba, I think. And so insofar as they can be defiant, because if the worst thing in the world has happened to you, then perhaps that is all you can talk about. Although they do, as the reason it fails the Bechdel test is they talk more about Darius than they do about themselves, and more about the only other male character on stage who's an infant, the son of Statira Regina and the younger brother of Statira Virgo, who presumably would have been the next Persian monarch if they hadn't. Rachael?
I can wait until you're done. I'm just, yeah.
You know how I am with being done.
I was going to say, if this, I think that you could do something with this section if we wanted it to be more than women talking about men, because it's like, it came up in, I think when we were doing Cleopatra by Samuel Daniel, and some other stuff, is that the king, he's a man, but he's also the government, not Jocasta, Cornelia, that we just, didn't we just do a second look at that? Like those things where it's the morning of a government and a passing, and that its times are changing. And I think also maybe the emphasis from these women on men are coming from, not just the playwright, but that this might in the future be up for presentation to the king, and there needs to be emphasis, possibly, I don't know for certain, but if it's going to be for a king, the emphasis on a king and on those, because there is a male child in this too, on the king and a male heir, and the ruins, that you can have of a government, cautionary tales. Maybe.
Emily.
I think real quickly, again, if you could save it by staging, if you would let these women maybe be the chorus, combine the chorus with these, let the character take over the chorus, basically. I'm going to be honest, I don't see yet a reason for Virgo to exist. I'd be inclined to cut her, unless she becomes plot important. But the other thing that I think you could do, because as you were talking, Rachael, the question became, again, why do so many male writers not know what women talk about? And of course, part of it is that something that I know I have done in real life, and I have seen other women do in real life, where as soon as, like, if guys are in the room, we become, our talk becomes acceptable and meek. And as soon as they're gone, then we talk shit. And so staging wise, you could have Alexander and his army and all these people like walking by, and the sense of we can be overheard at any point. So there could be some interesting things of like, I mean, if you really want to have fun with it, like Virgo maybe could be trying to like make a hole in the wall with a spoon, and that's why she's not talking much, while these other women are going, oh, we're so sad, what's going to happen? Might be something that would, at least it would give us a physical objective, and then it would give reason for why we are talking the way that men expect us to. The thought.
Liza.
It's possible. I mean, within the text, the reason I brought up Trojan women is when you're a prisoner, basically your only form of defiance is to die and deprive your captor of the satisfaction of conquering you. And they do repeatedly call on death in very visually creative ways, like the end of Sisigambis' first speech, where she calls for lightning to strike her, and then Statira Regina faints, but then when she comes to, she's really angry that she came to. It's like, why are the gods dragging me back into this world when I actually wanted to die? So I would read their longing for death not as defeatism, but as defiance. And that might help lift this scene, that they are not merely sad, they are angry. There is, I mean, while you two were reading and I was reading along in the script, I thought, this verse is a little bit better than Croesus, because this verse, he's still hamstrung in this extremely clunky pentameter quatrains that never end. But he's making it speak a little more. The characters are talking to each other a little bit more. There's still some declaiming, but it's not 100% declaiming. It's like some declaiming and some dialogue. Emily.
Before I go to Emily, just on it's better than the end of Croesus. I think some of the earlier stuff in Croesus was a lot better. But the stuff you were looking at last time, Emily.
Yeah.
Well, but exactly what you guys are saying. I think this scene feels like such a letdown, because again, he's, as we were just talking about in the previous scene, and then yes, in the middle section of Croesus, a little bit, you have characters talking to each other, influencing each other. And when you get especially to the section where it is single couplets among three women, which hurts my mathematical soul so hard, especially when he's already set up that he's willing to do triplets, but no, fine. So anyway, so he's just being clever and rhetorical. I mourn for him who in my womb was formed. I mourn for him in whom love me transformed. I mourn for him who did give form to me. Shall I no more in him my image see? But the fact that like you have A, B, B, they're not, the couplets aren't even speaking to each other. Do you know what I'm saying? The couplets aren't even responding to each other. And that is the whole point of a couplet, is that you have set up, response, set up, response, set up, response. That's how it works dramatically. And here you have it's not even one upmanship. Everyone is so in their own, like, just cleverness. It bothers me.
Liza.
Okay, as a musician, I've got a slightly different take on this, which is that this is choral music, and you're right. They're not. It's not a fencing match like we saw with Alexander and Parmenio. Often you do get one-line debate sections. This is different. This is lyricism. This is echoing. And one of the things I noticed while you were reading those lines was how many M sounds there were. And like these voiced consonants on which the sound still travels makes it a little bit M's and oohs and it just makes it a little bit more lyrical. So I think for me that was about sound and about singing.
But I think that the lyricism, because I agree, it's got a choral, especially again, Trojan woman feel. I mourn for him, I mourn for him, I mourn for him is lovely. But then the end of the line is defying his own work. And so it feels like stuttering because every third line, rather than being in harmony, is off. And it'd be fine if the third line were always off and rhymed with itself or something. But he's not working with three, and he's doing it in three. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and it does remind me of the bits in Croesus where he was striving for effect, and I feel that there's a bit of that here, that he's sort of striving for a thing, but it's not really actually what he's best at, and that this scene just doesn't work on that. The other frustrating thing I think about this scene is that we had a scenario for a scene at the end of the last act which was really good, like, oh, Darius is dead. Darius is dead. Oh, he's not dead. Cool. Which is and we didn't get that scene. We got this scene, and that's slightly annoying. The other thing to remember is also that this is effectively the prelude to what's about to happen next. So there's an interesting question about its relationship with what's going to be happening in the next sequence of action when Alexander actually enters the tent. I'm not going to suggest for a second it's going to save the scene, but there might be something that we haven't got to yet that may change our steer the boat slightly. Rachael.
No, I'm on these couplet things that we were talking about. I think you could take them in a certain way, like not just as choral music. I mean, if you tried to deliver them with a slightly different timing, because his syntax and the way that he does things seems timed so weird, so that some of the verse that I was saying at times, the way I was reading it, it felt almost like prose, and he's got a weird offbeat timing. And so for this, I mourn for him who in my womb was formed, and then Regina's as a response to that, I mourn for him in whom love me transformed. And then because Virgo's doesn't rhyme with that, I wonder if it's meant to be something that's broken off and to herself, and then immediately you have Sisigambis starting in again and responding to Regina, because it seems to be Virgo's couplets, or couplets things that are offbeat, like maybe she's a little off in the conversation and they're talking over her or something, and so hers are just you know what I mean, like she's trying to talk, or she's just saying it as an afterthought, like to join in with them, like I'm more, yeah, I don't know, it could just be really weird.
Okay, we need to just round off in final thoughts, talk about the play overall. I'm sure we're going to come back to this scene when we discuss the next scene next time, because I think thinking of them as a unit is going to be interesting. But we've had first two acts I think the room was very keen on, and disappointing third act, but Hey, that's what the blue pencil's for. Final thoughts in the room. Liza, any final thoughts?
Well, first of all, yeah, I find myself caring what happens, which I wasn't expecting to do. I really care what happens to Sisigambis. Please, if he's gonna kill her, please grant her the badass death she craved. Or if she doesn't die and survives to bury everyone else, that would be acceptable too. And the writer does... I like that the writer doesn't condemn people out of hand. He gives everyone a chance to bid for your sympathy. And Darius starts by doing that, and the chorus is like, no, he sucks, let me tell you why. And then Alexander and Parmenio, it's interesting, we get Darius by himself, then we get a 2-hand scene, then we get a 3-hand scene, punctuated by choruses. So that's structurally interesting too, that we see Darius solo, which is kind of the most powerful position for an audience to see a character. Then we see Alexander as half of a duo, and not even with Hephaestion, which is really interesting. Although Parmenio is as good a vehicle as any for that exposition. And then we see 3 women who may or may not be regarded as different aspects of one character, or, Alexander may have sort of lumped them all together under the form and name of woman. More lyrical writing. There are many times in that scene where I felt that if this was an opera, they would all be singing at the same time, in their own thoughts. So I am interested to see where we go from here. Don't let me down, William Alexander. You know what happens to authors that let me down. I dig them up out of the grave and I punch them in the face. Yeah.
We have been here before. Rachael, any final thoughts?
I think there's a lot. There's so much about this guy's writing that it's he's learning how to write a play. Like, his poet side is so strong. And how we were talking about this opening with the soliloquy, that he opens it with a soliloquy. If he wrote this before the previous play we've read by him, in the way that actors can be shy on stage and try and avoid an audience, I feel that where Croesus was so in your face with its opening, this one is very shy with its opening. And I think there's less confidence in this one for him as a writer, because the poetry stuff seems even stronger in this one than it was the last time. And I think he's clinging to what he knows to keep that. And maybe that's also why it's the scene with the last scene is it feels like the women aren't as differentiated, or they don't have as much place to go, possibly because he doesn't know how to write women, but also that's the scene with the most people talking at once. And that's, that you can't rely on a contrast as much there. You have to have more build up in your characters and more points of view that you're working with. I think for that scene, a production would need to workshop it more, because he's got that weird timing, and because I do think, even though these speeches are long, if there was ever classes that Beyond Shakes decided to host for like student actors or the public, that these would be great speeches to put in front of people, because there's so much he's showing for people to work with, that it could really help somebody find all the notes and a long piece to bring it, so that they could strengthen, with like if they were doing something like what we're doing in the afternoons, it really helps to support, dialogues and things like.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is when you're doing things which are formally much more structured, or things that are just harder to do. When you go to something that's dancing around a lot more, yeah, they just once you've lived through glass of government, you can do anything. Emily, any final thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting because last time with Croesus, we were lobbying for maybe a second look for Croesus. I'm lobbying for a second look with this play, and I think maybe what was being responded to was this playwright, like he's got the germ of something there, and I'm kind of like proud of him that he's experimenting with form more, experimenting with multiple characters and them talking to each other and having a point of view. And I will end on the nerdiest of notes, wherein what I was thinking of was actually T.S. Eliot's talking about the third voice, and how the purpose of a poet who wants to be a dramatist is to not write in your own voice and what you think about it, or what is generally thought about it in that sort of philosophical way. It could be said by anyone, but to be highly specific about what this character thinks about a thing. And I think up until the scene where we stopped today, good old Alexander actually has sort of discovered the third voice, different characters who speak in different ways, other than sort of generic or his own point of view. And so I'm excited by that. I'm really excited by that. And today was loads of fun to read.
Well, we will be continuing. Alexander is going to return. At some point, Darius might return. I don't know. I mean, everyone's sort of keeping an eye out for him, seeing if maybe a running banquet will appear and just keep us all amused. All that remains is to thank all the wonderful readers for all their wonderful reading and for wonderful thoughts. So it's been a really, really good discussion. Thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye. Even to be happy is a dangerous thing.